Welcome to Fret Buzz the podcast. My name is Joe McMurray.
And I am Aaron Sefchick.
And today we are sitting down for a conversation with Barry Privett, the lead vocalist and songwriter and manager of the band Carbon Leaf. Incredible band that has been touring for 25 years. They've been grinding it out successfully. I really love their music, and I even went to a concert of theirs a few weeks ago. I was telling Aaron part of why I'm so interested in talking to you, because you're very successful on this long range. Like 25 years is success in my mind. You're not MTV for the most part. I don't know if you have been, but you're not like Katy Perry. You're like actually out there working, which is far more interesting to me.
It's much more interesting than a Maybelline contract.
Yeah, so
no, sometimes I wonder.
at least for us looking in, it's very interesting.
Yes. Well, it's funny you mentioned Katy Perry. She was in our first video, the second video.
That's what Aaron was wondering about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's we early on, yeah, I think some bands click and gel, and the thing that they have just kind of gets broadcast and people embrace it, and things are a lot easier for us. It took us a very long time for us to kind of figure out what we were doing as a group musically. And during this period, we were just kids. We were just kind of kids, just feeling it out, and took a while for the sound to get there. And so we couldn't really buy help. We had to learn to do everything ourselves, and did. And a lot of our career has been like that. There's a brief period where through doing things ourselves, we kind of got to where we felt like we were in a good place, and then got some attention. But it didn't start like that. There wasn't this fireball. Wasn't like Dave Matthews Band, that just like they get this magic kinetic thing together, and then all these people were just like beamed in on it, and then picked up by the management and the label and all that. So
Right.
we kind of had the workman's approach, and we're able to, I think, in at the end of the day, kind of saved our necks on more than one occasion when we had to pick those reins back up after having a bunch of team on board. That stuff kind of comes and goes, and a lot of what kills bands is that they don't have those skills. If they get early success or they get a lot of handlers, they don't know how to run their own business. And once some of that stuff goes away, and you've got this top heavy thing that you're trying to learn how to manage, then it can kind of crush you.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Were you coming out at the same time as Dave Matthews, just down the road? And you guys were like within 100 miles of each other.
Yeah,
pretty similar time.
Yeah, they I think they formed maybe in '89, and we formed in like 92, 93. So by the time we had like just started playing, they were like a year away from being like blowing up.
Right.
And by that time, like in 93, I mean, they were doing kind of regular gigs, I think, at Tracks and Flood Zone on the Tuesdays and Wednesdays, the free shows or the $5 shows or whatever. So they were definitely getting a buzz. But our first outdoor show as a band was on campus at our alma mater, Randolph-Macon, up here in Ashland, Virginia, for Earth Day, spring of '93. And it was opening for Dave Matthews. They were headlining the campus concert. But there was only like 200 people there, so they were still very under the radar for a lot of people. But then I think Under the Table and Dreaming came out like a year later, and then so our paths, while we kind of started within the 3 or 4 years, we were just like a cover band, and they were they kind of, we kind of, the trajectories kind of went like this.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So,
And
it
that's
took us 8
fascinating.
years to kind of get out of the, we're a cover band, we're just having fun.
Mhm.
Wait, let's do this seriously. Well, if we're gonna do this seriously, let's not play covers. We're not enjoying that. Let's try writing. Took us some time.
Was that 95 album Meander the first original album?
Yeah, so we recorded the very first recording we did was a 4-song demo tape.
Mm.
And we did that at a friend's, Tommy Gwaltney did that at his house studio in Virginia Beach, because he was into engineering and all. So we recorded in his house. We had amps, everything spread out through his house, and he did a good job. And we cut 4 songs, our first 4 songs, and we would dupe those. For that whole year when we were starting to play out, we had all these Tascam tape decks stacked in our living room, and we would just hit record on these things and make dupes, and then we would throw those out at shows. That was kind of like our thing. I'd pull out a backpack at a certain point and I'd throw these things out. And we did that for a couple of years before we made Meander, which was our first album and like a CD. So it was like a big deal because CDs were like, we can put this on a CD,
Yeah.
And 4 of the songs that were on the demo made it onto the Meander album. So that was our first official full-length record.
There were a couple of those songs that had a very Red Hot Chili Peppers and kind of vibe, and one actually, Kettle, had a very Pearl Jam feel to it.
Well, yeah, and if you wanted to keep going, I mean, that album was basically, Red Hot Chili Peppers meets Pearl Jam meets Nirvana meets REM. It was like our first 12 songs as a band. And the 5 of us had very different influences. Our bassist at the time, Palmer Stearns, original bassist, was super into Chili Peppers. So
Yeah.
it's like, even if we were like writing a ballad, he was like slapping. And but when you're young and you're writing your first group of music, as you all I'm sure know, that feeling of being just young, you're in a room doing this, the energy is just like so kinetic that you're creating something. It's like everything's allowed. It's like, that's great, you're not scrutinizing a whole lot at that point,
Right.
which is actually really a nice kind of pure state to be in.
Yeah.
And sometimes you wish you could get back to that, because sometimes I feel like, I don't know, but I would say part of me is we've gotten really good at censoring ourselves for good reasons. And then part of me says, keep an open mind. Let's just, let's try this. So that album, it was all over the map stylistically. And it was, and I think there's like 5 or 6 good songs on there and the rest are not good songs, but it represented a time in our career where it was everything in the kitchen sink, and there wasn't a whole lot of judgment on it. And for that reason, I think it was kind of it's nice to look back and say, this was the start, for better or worse.
Right.
It's probably something on there that each band member really liked. With a lot of my bands, there's a song that, like, I might not have liked one song, but it's my bass player's favorite song.
Right.
Like, that seems to happen because everybody's just got different things they like more.
Yeah. And you don't have any real rapport yet as artists with one another. You don't quite know how to use constructive criticism or facilitative language. Hey, I really love this part. What about this other part here? Maybe we can do something differently. You don't really have that language, and we had to learn that language in subsequent records. And it definitely got contentious, and it was hard not to offend or be offended.
Yeah.
But we all kind of had to take our lumps. And I remember several instances where I was called out for things that just weren't good, either thematically or vocally or what. So, it's just part of growing up and working with people in a very sensitive thing where you're collaborating artistically.
Yeah, you put your heart out there, and then when somebody criticizes it's hard to accept that a lot of times.
Yeah, there's songs like on that, since you're talking about that album, I mean, I'm thinking through it. I mean, there's definitely, I definitely remember not really liking certain certain things about it. The bass was a good example, where Palmer was a great bass player and had a great ear for melody and was dexterous. And, I leaned more towards the more melodic stuff. And so whenever he started slapping, it wasn't that it wasn't cool or interesting. It's like, I didn't know quite what to do with it because I didn't grow up on a lot of that kind of music, So I'm trying to write my way into, his vision for the song, and we're, both coming from different places. So sometimes you can collaborate and come up with something fresh and original, and it's amazing. Sometimes you can collaborate and come up with something that's different, but maybe it doesn't hit the mark.
Yeah, you get a fusion of everybody's influences, and that could be something really special that you wouldn't have ever been able to come up with on your own.
Right. And part of the if it's one thing we've learned about, pursuing art, is that you don't be so precious with it that you don't experiment and that you don't, write those songs that fail. Because frankly, you might be able to take a little teeny piece of that to use down the road and make something, better. So I guess you've got to kind of not hold back on just trying stuff, so that you if there's going to be stinkers, you may as well get them over with.
Yeah. There's no better way to learn, really.
Right.
Sometimes it's I know that sometimes it's hard to, like you were saying before, sometimes you're presented with an idea or something from another member and you don't really know what to do with it. But you got to at least try, because on the other side of it, you may come up with something that's really interesting.
Yeah, and some stuff will sit. I mean, and that's a frustrating thing, I know, for the guys. We're a band. I write the lyrics, I come up with the themes and the concepts and the vocal melodies and all. That's kind of my thing. And then, historically, the guys would write a piece of music, or they would get together in groups of twos or threes, and they'd either have a little sketch or a hook or a verse, or even a whole song, and they'll send it to me, and I'll take it, and I'll kind of funnel it into my system of things to listen to, and then see what bubbles at the top. So there could be songs that they're submitting for me that, sit on the shelf for years and years and years, and they never hear from it again until maybe one day something strikes me and I pull it out, and, we have a song. So they've kind of learned that to just keep trying stuff, keep floating it out there, but not like get real hung up on the turnaround time,
Right. When you write your lyrics, are you inspired from the overall feeling from the stuff that they submit to you, or is it more of a subject matter that you're kind of applying to the song, or
It's
mix of?
it's happened both ways. I would say more, definitely early on, more about listening to the music and then seeing what's going to come from it.
Right. Okay.
And that still remains kind of the easiest way for me to get my ideas. That's my springboard, and I'm lucky because the guys, have different styles and skills and sounds and textures and genre styles. So I get a bunch of different pieces of music that I'm allowed to kind of go in some different directions.
Right.
and that's the easiest way, you know. If you have a song like Lake of Silver Bells, you know, really the for me, that concept and titling just came from this weird overtone sound within the recording that I don't even think was deliberate. And I was like, you know, I'm like leaning in, I'm like, what is this real shimmery kind of weird sound? And to me, it just like it started evoking this place, you know, this bell and this lake and this house, and this, all of a sudden the song kind of just started gushing out. But then there's other things that I do, either keep a notebook of ideas, and or if I have an idea, I'll pick up a guitar and play my 10 chords and come up with, you know, an approximation to give them, and make prettier. But The War Was in Color is another song that actually started from the idea as opposed to the music. I had written down in my notebook just the line, the war was in color. And I didn't know what it was going to be. I didn't know it was going to be if it was going to be a song or a poem or a story or whatever. I had no idea. And I think it sat there for several years. And then when Carter turned in a demo of this guitar riff,
yeah, he's the lead guitarist for everybody listening.
Carter's our lead guitarist, and he turned in this guitar lick that just sounded like that it just, my mind automatically went to that line I wrote in the notebook. The war was in color, and I was like, that, you know, and he didn't know about it. He just is submitting music, and I'm like, that hook, that guitar part is the war was in color, and so I wrote that, and it's great when that happens, because then all you need is kind of your melody, and then everything writes itself. You know where you're supposed to go with it. Then it's just kind of time in the water with the notebook, you know.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle putting it together a lot of times for me.
Yeah.
Trying to make like if you have a main hook idea for a chorus, and you're trying to build the verses to make the chorus make sense, or sometimes it's the opposite. Yeah. But a lot of times I do end up sitting in a notebook trying to work out the rhymes, and sometimes they don't work, and you've got to somehow get your point across a different way.
Yeah, and that is one of the toughest things to learn for me, is that you know, when you start thinking in and that early on, it was a big thing. Like, I'm still fairly wordy, but like when I was our earlier stuff, things were like super wordy, and I wasn't taking into consideration the music side, you know, the consideration of less is more, or, hey, people actually want to hear some of the music and not hear you singing over it. And then like what you're talking about, where when you realize some of those things, but you've kind of set up this template, and you have to blow that out. That's tough. Yeah. So I try to really keep that in mind more now, about in terms of just melody first, melody first. Don't get locked into a rhyming or a lyric pattern, really see how much you can make the music breathe, and then try to fit your words around it. But I still struggle with that. I'm struggling with one right now like that, where I'm like, maybe I'm not writing enough because I'm forgetting some of those things,
Yeah, it's a cool time to bring this up, because Aaron has started a songwriting critique that airs live on Friday nights once a month.
That sounds terrifying.
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's it's nice, because sometimes we as artists put ourselves in this bubble, and it's nice to hear an outside influence from other musicians, other artists, and how they hear and how they view your work. It kind of opens your mind in terms of things that you could work on and other directions that you might want to go, or
sure.
it's definitely a cool process. A little nerving at sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's all good in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. And anybody can submit to this. So
Yeah.
like I wasn't actually on the recording. He had a panel of teachers that sat in a room and listened to submissions.
Yeah.
And I actually sent mine in. I just emailed it to Aaron, and I got to listen to a critique of my song. It was a really cool thing. So any of our listeners out there, if you do have a song you're working on and you want feedback on it, you can send it in, and 5-6 music instructors will actually critique your song and give you honest feedback. It's a really cool thing. And it's completely free. It's actually helpful to us if you submit songs.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, that's a brave act too. I mean, to be able to expose yourself to opinion.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of guts.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
And especially if it's not a finished product.
Right.
Like if it's just a demo you recorded.
Yeah, and that's a tough line. That's a tough thing to determine as the creator is when to kind of share it with people. And if you get in the habit of, you have to understand kind of why you're wanting to share it. If you're just looking for the ephemera of feeling good, about someone's feedback, sometimes that can kind of blow up in your face if you're not going through the revision process of what you're creating. If you're not letting it sit cold and kind of revisiting it and and sharpening your own acumen, for critique. That's my thing. It's like I've learned when it's time to share something and when it's not. And if I can let something sit cold and come back and go, that part's not good, let me fix that, and then when I feel like it's where it should be, then I'm kind of more apt to share it, as opposed to like, I don't know, what do you think? But that's not saying that's wrong, because like you said, Aaron, you might very well have a fresh perspective from someone else. That they're just not even thinking about.
Yeah. And the one thing that I do, and Joe and I were talking about this previous to the show, is that we do give a short 3-minute synopsis of things that we're aware of, that we have mistakes. We are all human beings, and like I was saying it, before I went through my submission, I'm aware of things that I need to work on, and these are the things that I can hear in the song, and I'm sure you guys will agree as well. I'm just wondering if there are other things that you guys hear that I might not hear. So yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's nice to be able to hear what other people hear, because we are, as musicians, we kind of do get into these bubbles, especially as we gain a fan base, or we have followers. We have a tendency for those followers just to praise everything that we do, and likewise with friends and family. They kind of have a tendency to go, oh no, that sounds great, and it's kind of a biased opinion. You may not actually be getting the best feedback.
Yeah, well, and starting out, that may be the feedback that they need the most, though, is just encouragement to keep going.
Right.
And that's where the facilitative language comes into play, and you're like, I really like this part,
Yeah.
more like this part here.
Yep.
The facilitative language is that's a great phrase.
Yeah.
It's
great for any line of work, but it is especially important in songwriting.
Yeah. And and when you're young, and we've worked with young people before, both just on board as team and crew members, and but just in dealing with younger musicians, well, young and old people, but just young in their art, really doubling down on the encouragement and picking out the things that you think are inspiring and great can go so much further than just be like, this is, you got some problems here, It's like, that's tough. That's tough to take.
Yeah.
I try to do that in my private lessons with my students. I'll listen to something and something will irk me throughout their whole, like, they're playing the song they worked on, and I have to take a breath and I'm like, okay, this part was great. Your rhythm was great, or your dynamic, something. I try to force myself to say something really nice before I pick
Dig
at them.
in.
Yeah. To
Yeah.
try to, like, make them
And
feel like I'm not just attacking them.
Yeah, and the lesson realm is probably very difficult too, because there's I'm sure there's so much there that is not necessarily 100% effort sometimes. I mean, if I remember back when I was taking lessons, and I'd show up because I had it scheduled, but I didn't really rehearse and practice. I mean, you've got the instructor there that clearly knows
Oh, yes.
that you haven't put in the time, and you wanna tell them the truth, that you're wasting both our time, and I'm just taking your money right now, and 2 weeks will pass and we will have been talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
That's tough. um, but if I imagine your job is easier, like you say, about picking the stuff that's encouraging, if they're really like working at it, and you feel like they're doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're being paid by their parents often to make them get better. So you're like, I feel like if the kid doesn't improve, I feel like I'm at fault. And so you do feel like you have to bring up the negatives though,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
because you're their coach.
Yeah.
right.
But I want to go back to you. You said you took lessons. Were you taking voice lessons? Or what were
For
you,
a,
what is your musical
for a hot minute.
origin?
I don't really have a musical origin. Uh, you know, it was just kind of, I took piano for 3 years when I was, 10, 11, and 12. I took trumpet when I was 11, 12, 13.
Uh,
I picked up, the guitar, a half dozen times between, my, 15 years old and 30 years old. And, um, only just sang, a little bit in the choir when I was a kid, at church.
mhm.
Didn't really start doing any kind of singing until college. Just fell into the band. So I don't really have a whole lot of musical growth from a young age. I'm a more of a utilitarian kind of musician, or not even a musician, I guess. I'm just kind of facilitating music. Sometimes I feel like, I'm the lyric writer, I'm the vocalist.
Yeah.
I can kind of get to A to B, but there's definitely a difference in my skill level in terms of a vocalist with real vocalists out there. I mean, it's clear you can clearly hear the difference. That probably comes from a lifetime of devoting to it, but also just in my daily routines, I have a finite amount of time where things need to happen, and so I try to schedule singing time for myself when we're off the road. But it's probably it's an hour to an hour and a half, as opposed to what should be like 4 hours or 5 hours. But there's at a certain point you're just like, this is what I have time for. These are the priorities. So it's funny that, and I regret not keeping up with piano, and I love the piano, and I still have fantasies about like getting back into it and learning, but I still relate everything to to the treble and bass clef. It's like I can still read music, and I still, when I hear notes or if I'm working through things, I still relate it to how they lay down on the piano keyboard. So that's good.
It's fascinating to me that you don't have your voice is so you have a very clear like it's a powerful voice. It's not like an operatic voice, but like you're not like it's a very pleasing voice. I don't know how else to say it, but
Thanks.
it's a warm. It's like if Anthony Kiedis from the Chili Peppers had a cleaner, like a stronger, clearer voice to me. But it's in that realm of like male baritone.
Yeah, it's a
like you're
baritone.
not getting up into falsetto. You're like you have a very it's a nice I enjoy it.
Thanks. Yeah,
But it's surprising me that you didn't have any training because it does sound polished.
I kind of work in my limitations, but I took lessons from a guy at VCU for I don't know, a year or two, and this was back when we're first starting to tour, and we weren't even touring. We were just kind of like the weekend warriors at that point, and coming out of college, where we would go and play fraternity houses on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, and then I'd come back in for my lesson on Monday. And back then, when you played these college gigs, these fraternity things, you would play from 10 to 2. That was like the contract. It was always the contract, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m.
Right.
And we would play that whole thing. We were a cover band, and we would play that whole time except for a 120-minute break. And it was just like I could never do that now. But when you're 21,
you
just kind of do it.
Yeah,
but
that's
and
typical.
We were playing like really, just anything under the sun, but it was very taxing on the vocals. And so I'd show up to Monday with at the piano, with the teacher, and he'd be trying to teach me the proper way of breathing and singing, and we'd be doing all these show tunes, and my voice was smoked. And I mean, I could just tell that he was just like, he'll do it, he'll show up, he'll book and bill me, but it is not doing me any good. So I had to give that up.
Sometimes when I took voice lessons, the first couple lessons, just learning how to breathe properly made me significantly better. Like there's never been a spike as big as from the first few vocal lessons of having someone teach me how to properly breathe.
Right.
So there's some I feel like anybody could benefit from a few vocal lessons.
I know, and the breathing thing is the hardest thing, and I know it's kind of like stretching or yoga. It's like if you do it once, you're like, oh, well, clearly I'm just going to do this every day because this is the easiest path towards getting stronger and better and all. And of course you're like, well, I only have 30 minutes, so let me just do like this really hard, let me just sing really hard for 30 minutes because that'll like that'll be I'll cover. I know I need to sing hard. Let's just do that. We'll skip this breathing and stretching part. But you're right. If I just had 5 hours to do it, I'd be a better singer. For a lot of my job, I've kind of learned it's if I'm singing by myself in a room, I'm definitely not like a real ornate singer. But if I'm singing in a room by myself, it is definitely more. There is more nuance. But when I'm playing in the band, it's a different beast. You're trying to get your vocal to kind of cut through all of this stuff on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And even just the physical proximity of where I am on stage between two guitarists and then the drummer and the bass amp behind me, your voice becomes all of a sudden, the resonance just kind of starts going like this. And then before you know it, your voice is like this, and you're just trying to shoot your voice through everything, and so that you know, over time that really trains your voice to kind of act a certain way, as opposed to like a singer songwriter who's sitting there playing and singing. It's a different thing.
Out of curiosity, do you guys use an in-ear monitor system or anything like that on stage?
Yeah, we do. And that certainly helps. We went 10 years without them
Right.
when we started out. And then we were, 2002, when we started really touring a lot and started noticing the ear fatigue, we switched to ears.
Yeah.
And that's saved our hearing, saved my hearing. But it's still not the same as just singing in a room.
Right. Right.
You've got these impressions that are going down into your canal. So you're now, yes, you're hearing sound coming through those, but you're also hearing the bones in your head, and your singing is informed by how, the sound is resonating in your head.
Mm-hmm.
If you plug your ears, you're going to hear your voice reacting in a different way that you can't just simulate with just putting sound through the ear monitors.
Right.
So there's concessions you just have to make.
Do you feel like while you're on tour, do you ever get hoarse or deal with like vocal fatigue that you think hurts your performance?
Yeah. So yes, and I just actually purchased a new set of ears. Like I've gone through 5 different companies, for ear monitors, trying to find like this perfect thing. But the reality is there's certain parts of my range that will get fatigued or blown out, and kind of I'll start to get real reedy in certain spots. That said, when we go on tour, let's say we go on tour, like we'll leave Monday for a month, and the first 3 or 4 days are tough. Like day 4 is like really tough because your schedule's different, and you're performing live for 2 hours a night, and once you get to that 4th day, you've kind of got day 4, day 5 where things are kind of shaky. And then from there, though, once you get to day 6 or day 7, you're kind of over that hump. And then by day 10, you're bulletproof. And so from there, you can do 30 days in a row and do everything you want to do for the most part. I'll lose some notes at the top of my range. If we're doing like a 30-day run, there's certain songs that I know I'll have to alter the melody on a few places to not completely destroy me for subsequent days. So that's just kind of the reality there. But yeah, once you can kind of, if you can do 4 or 5 days in a row and push and get through that, then you can do 30 days in a row. And we do that usually because just taking days off is just costly, and a couple of guys that are married want to get back. So instead of spending, 8 weeks out west, we'll do it in 4, and we'll trim out a lot of the in between places, and we'll drive through the night to get to, where we want to get, and just keep pushing. And frankly, when you get to a point where you're just going every night, it's easier to do that than to take a day off.
Right. What do you do on a day off? You guys like go hike, or if you're like driving around out west, do you do anything together as a group, or do you write songs?
So last year we did 28 shows in 30 days out west. And usually if it's a day off, you're driving, let's say you're driving from, Austin to Phoenix,
Right.
So it's a drive day. So there's not a whole lot of luxury there. We used to have, back when we had more days off, when we were on the road more, when we were younger and we didn't have obligations back home and life was a little simpler. Yeah, we would have the sit down breakfasts, and we would, you know, tool around a bit, but it's not as romantic like that these days.
Everybody just relaxes on the bus, and
Everyone's got their own space on the bus. Yeah. And I mean, I manage the band, so I'm usually working. I mean, you know, get up, exercise in the parking lot, and fix breakfast, and, you know, while we're rolling, and then just manage things on the road. The guys, you know, if we drive ourselves, so, you know, whoever's driving the shift. Otherwise, guys, you know, sleep, or they, you know, read or do whatever they do, kind of in their own worlds.
So since you manage and do most of the legwork, you're talking about touring and setting up 30-day gigs. How do you go about that process? Is that something that you do all on your own in terms of reaching out to venues and then, you know, setting up the path of that tour, or how does that?
Yeah. So we have, each of us has several duties within the band. You know, Terry does a lot, you know, has been doing a lot of the social media marketing stuff. And, and then in terms of the booking goes, we have a booking agent. That's the one person that we have,
Okay.
that actually gets the contracts. I will take the year. I'll print out every month of calendar of the year, and I will post a note where I want to be on what night, what city I want to be in, what night throughout the whole year. We'll say, look, this is when we're going to be in this region of the country, and we map it out like that. So, and then I will give that to our agent and say, let's pursue this. And he takes my calendar of the cities on the nights that we want, January through December, and he goes about pursuing the contracts or getting the holds for the venues, which is that's tough. That is a lot of work, because there's thousands of bands.
Yes.
competing for the same, you know, 3 venues worth playing in San Francisco, you know.
Right.
And it's like,
yep. Yeah.
you know, you try to jump in early as possible, but, you know, you could be 5th hold or 4th hold behind 3 other acts that need to, you know, either, you know, clear the date or, you know, say we're confirming it. So it's this big kind of amorphous thing. If something doesn't work out in that city for you, then you kind of have to shift your strategy, you know, for the week, and maybe you want to move San Francisco to a different night, which means you've got to, you know, deal with LA and deal with Portland and, you know, everything that's along your route.
Yeah.
So we do a pretty good job. You know, with that system, we get about 85% of what we want in terms of the city and the night.
And then how, on average, and obviously that fluctuates, how, in terms of your gigging schedule and your touring schedule, how often or how many dates a year do you generally like to tour?
Right. So at our peak, back when we were touring behind Indian Summer, which was released in 2004, and was getting radio play.
did that have Life Less Ordinary on it?
Life Less Ordinary was kind of the single at the time, and it was getting it was doing well at AAA radio, and then it was getting traction at Hot AC radio, which opens up your opportunities and also really jams your schedule. So, and that was back in the day when you could tour behind a successful album for like 2 years.
Right.
You know, it was a lot. So when I think at our peak, we did like 250 days a year out on the road.
Right.
Wow.
Now we're like, now we've drilled down to about 80 to 100 days out on the road.
Okay.
And most of those are shows. Like I said, we don't do a whole lot of days off. So if we're out, we're playing, and unless we're driving somewhere. So we kind of slashed a lot of the fat off of the tour, you know, and
Yep.
a lot of the just said goodbye to a lot of markets, and do typically now we do a big fall, kind of September through December is when we'll do the kind of US, and then in the spring we do kind of a handful of shows in kind of secondary markets, usually everything kind of west of the Mississippi.
Okay.
I mean, east of the Mississippi.
Okay.
So anything more than that really like creates a lot of tension with, you know, again, 3 of the guys are married with kids. So there's a balance you got to strike there. And, you know, and also, frankly, you know, your creative output suffers if you're just on the road all the time. And even now, you know, 80 days is too, you know, is feels like too much sometimes. I mean, to put on, to coordinate 100 days, you know, when you're self-managed, is, you know, not just 100 days of tour, but 100 days of preparation for that tour.
Right.
So it's just less time that you have to create and all. So that's something we're trying to address is to get some extra help to help us cover some of that legwork so that we can spend more time in the studio that we, you know, built creating.
Right.
When you play venues, are you typically paid on the door, or do you have how's payment usually structured for these types of venues?
It depends. Typically you shoot for a guarantee versus a percentage over a certain amount of whatever the house nut is. Some venues, if you're, you know, not a proven thing in the market, or they're not into doling out guarantees, sometimes you just do you'll do a door deal. So it really depends on where you are in the market and kind of what you can negotiate. But typically we like to get a guarantee, and then if it reverts, you know, then it reverts over a certain percentage of the door.
So when you go, I mean, if you go out and play somewhere kind of out west, do the crowds, what are your crowds like in smaller places? Do you have people that just come out that that have heard of you, and you actually can fill up a place in a small town out west?
Yeah. It's funny. It seems like now we can kind of go just about anywhere, and they're like, it'll be 100 people at the very least.
Right.
Which is still not terrific, but then again, it's not nothing, right?
Right. That's exactly right.
And you know, on nights like that where you are in between your major markets, it covers your bottom line, if nothing else. Covers your expenses for the day, puts a little bit of money in your pocket. So those can actually strategically, you know, add up. And you know, the days of where just people randomly like come out to check you out, you know, there's not tons of that business. Some places are more than others, like Phoenix. You know, if we play Phoenix, there'll be a good amount of people that are just there checking you out. But mostly it's fans that know you're coming to town. So you know, on the low side, that's, you know, you get 100 people in the door. On the high side, out west, you know, Seattle's a good market for us. So we'll do this fall. We'll do one night at a standing rock venue, which is I think 650 or 700 people, and we usually sell that out. And then the next day we'll do a seated cabaret venue, which is like 300 seats, and we'll do 2 shows back to back on the following day. So that's a good weekend for us in Seattle, and play in front of a lot of your fans and do 2 different types of shows, and a kind of big electric rock show, and then the seated acoustic shows, and you know, make good money and all that. Portland's usually like 350, 400 people. You know, LA is like 150. San Fran's like 300. And then San Diego is going to be like 125, 150.
Is that because you guys like your music doesn't connect with the people in that region, or because you haven't toured that area as much to build up a fan base over time?
Yeah. A lot of it has to do with how much, Seattle, Portland, San Diego, um, Boise, Spokane, some of those places out west. Denver. We were getting good radio play for a couple of years, and that helped jumpstart the audience.
Yep.
That also has actually ebbed, after those kind of couple of years of activity where all your shows were backed by heavy radio promotion, where they were sponsoring the events, and you got just tons of mentions. I mean, you still can't compete with that kind of reach. I mean, if a radio station has listeners and their station sponsoring the event and they're mentioning it, I mean, that goes a long way.
Right.
Once that kind of goes away, you shuck away a lot of those people, and then you're kind of left with your fans. But the fans that you're left with are really dedicated, and I can predict pretty accurately by now who's going to show up just by our email list,
right?
Which is a great place to be if you don't have the outside promotion. So, but Seattle, we got a lot of support, and it's a great town, so we're lucky to have that kind of as a cornerstone. San Diego, on the other hand, we got good play there, and over the years, that audience has kind of come down a bit. I'm wondering, I don't know if is it more of a transient town? Did like the fans that were coming into those those early shows, did they kind of move away?
Right.
Because it's probably like maybe half of what it used to be.
And then do you see any anything come from things like, I know you guys have done things like Curious George, or you have like commercial type stuff that you've done for like Pontiac or something like that. Did you see any return from any of that?
Yeah, I think it all kind of adds, but it's not like any of that stuff is ever a game changer.
No.
And frankly, the Curious George, I mean, that was, we on the surface we got paid well, but when you actually break it down into the amount of work that you put into it over the time, it's not like it's just, again, it's not like it's a game changer. It's just one more thing that you can add,
right,
to the story. The Pontiac vibe thing, I mean, we didn't see any kind of spikes. We got paid really well for not doing anything. We won a contest, and got paid $20,000 to win a contest, and they put the song on the commercial. But
that's nice.
Yeah.
But that was kind of back in the .com era when the internet was still kind of becoming a thing.
Yeah.
And in 2000 and in 99 and 2000, 2001, 2002, it's like everybody was having these contests. All these websites were having contests. Enter this band contest.
Yeah.
And we entered. Terry, our guitarist, and at the time he was working at a recording studio, and in his off time he would sit there on the computer and he would just enter all these contests, and you'd have to upload an MP3, which took like an hour. and he'd fill out a form and upload a song, and there was they were giving away real money. I mean, it's how we won the 20 grand off Pontiac, and it's how we got entered into the AMA contest, and it was a different era, but it was there for the taking.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely the music scene has definitely changed over the past. And you guys talking about you had started in '93, 25 years. You know, it's changed many times. How do you see it currently in terms of the whole streaming and very social media centric right now? It's very much a different landscape.
Yeah, I mean, kind of the traditional marketing has changed, where, just where we were talking about all this promotion, where you could win contests on the internet and um, all of a sudden, it meant something to kind of be endorsed by someone, that American Music Award contest that we entered and became a finalist. And then we went on this big tour promotion, and it was sponsored by Coca-Cola, and all of a sudden nothing attracts a crowd like a crowd. I feel like a lot of that's gone away. And there's so much competing for people's attention and entertainment dollar. 10 or 15 years ago, you really focused on trying to throw the net, in search of new fish. You spend
Right.
a lot of time and money really looking in places. And when we realized you could spend the rest of your life and money going into the hole doing that strategy, was that going to be the best thing for us? And in 2010, when we'd kind of run the course at the record label, when they weren't offering really anything other than just money to make a record, with no real true marketing plan or muscle or reach, we decided, let's build our own studio. Let's rein things in like we used to do. Let's stop, investing in all of this overhead and team, and let's see where the ceiling is with just being as autonomous as we can. And let's stay solvent. Let's not go into debt. And we did. And, we set a goal of making a new piece of music every 8 months. So in 2010, we built the studio, and we just started releasing records directly to our fans. And in short, we were like, let's just pay attention to the people that are paying attention to us already and see what happens. We'll let our audience know that we've accumulated the last 15 years, that we're serious artists, that we're going to be writing and recording and touring, and join us on this journey. And so that's how we've had to combat kind of how do you compete in an industry where there's so much noise, there's competition coming from every corner. And I guess the answer was, let's not compete with that. There's limitations. I mean, we're playing to a much more concentrated audience, and it'd be nice to have more marketing dollars, but it's hard to know kind of where to put that right now. So we're just trying to control what we can, and then if an opportunity opens up, we'll be in a good position to make those adjustments.
That is going to do it for today for part 1 of 2 with Barry Privett of Carbon Leaf. If you haven't already, head over to iTunes and leave us a review. The more reviews, the more we have the opportunity to continue having great quality guests. Also, don't forget we do have a YouTube channel where you can find the entire library of all the guests and topics that we've talked about. And lastly, if you haven't already, head over to fretbuzzthepodcast.com and sign up, subscribe, check out the Songwriting Club, and come join us. Cool. Next Thursday it is, part 2 with Barry Privett of Carbon Leaf. on Fret Buzz, the podcast.